Yeah, so here I am in Shropshire again, on my way back to Spain, but just for the moment we're going to have to put up with the wind, the rain and the killer sheep. Yeah, so this week saw the release of DxO PhotoLab version 9, and there's been a lot of frothing on various forums on YouTube about whether this version is finally the Lightroom killer, about is this the ultimate professional photography processing tool and so on and so forth. And I want to really examine what that means because in my experience, and I've been a professional photographer probably 15 years now, my job has changed pretty radically. And I think the assumption that the only game in town is Adobe is one that is partially based on fact. It's definitely the case that Adobe houses, designers, and so on all use Adobe tools. So there is definitely a preference for Adobe output from photographers where the product is going to be magazine advertisements with writing all over them, and whether they're going to be lifted into some bigger design project. So for photographers who spend their days slaving away in the studio, Adobe probably is the only game in town. These are photographers that are literally producing thousands of shots a day and making very good money at it. It's a very well-paid profession, but we're talking about probably, 1% of photographers. Now, I moved to Spain after running a studio in the UK, and in a good week I'll probably make 50%, or a good month rather, probably 50% of my income currently comes directly from working with clients. The rest of it, print sales, a little bit, affiliate income, writing articles, promoting software that I use, making YouTube videos about software that I use. All this brings in a steady trickle of income. And other activities such as, taking photographs to illustrate articles that I write, taking photographs for thumbnails for YouTube, taking photographs to be used on YouTube for teaching materials. And we've lately started promoting holidays, so photography holidays, extended visits to the Alpujarras. We've got one coming up in March. If you want to see the details of that as a link, it wouldn't be right to make this video without promoting my own company. But have a look in the description down below and you'll find a link to 8 Peaks Photography, and details of those tours are there. So I think a lot of photographers are in this boat, having to diversify, and I think the job has become different. So there are now better cameras, there are cameras that enable influencers to do their own photography, whereas 20 years ago they would have needed to hire a professional photographer. That's no longer the case. So I think things have changed, and I think there is a requirement now that doesn't say Adobe, it says really good photo processing software needed for a variety of different purposes. And I think DxO have spotted that gap really well and fitted adroitly into it, because where I think they fit in the scheme of things is for photographers who are, I guess in the old-fashioned word would have been semi-pro. So photographers who want a really good development environment. They are primarily concerned with the quality of their photographs. And really, appreciate having to do the extra little bit of work that you have to do in a sophisticated photography environment. But DxO have worked really hard to make this easy. The The layout of the tooling is very intuitive. You can simply go down through the controls from top to bottom, and that will give you effectively a workflow. I'm not suggesting you use all of the tools, but use the tools that you feel suits the photograph, and that will give you a perfectly serviceable output. The other thing that DxO have done really well, and it's great for people like me, is you can tailor the output, so you can batch process. There's a couple of different ways you can apply batch processing. One of them is you can create your own preset. So I could go out, take a bunch of pictures for a client, and then I could come back, develop one, assuming they're all in the same lighting conditions. I could develop all of those that are in, you know, a bright sunny field in Shropshire with a little bit of rain, for example, and get a good balanced exposure. And then I could keep that as a preset and apply it to all of the rest of the photographs in the batch, and then just do the little tweaks that are extra. But when it comes to outputting the photograph, I can apply settings for all of my different platforms. So I can create a setting that will put out a full-size 3840 by 2160, whatever it is, for 4K rendering on YouTube. I can put out one that is, you know, for social media, that is 1920 by 1080, and I can, you know, optimize my output for print, for social media, for television, film, whatever it takes, and I can export it all as a batch job. I can assign a directory underneath my root directory, or underneath the directory where the pictures are stored. I can assign a directory that says YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, etc. And all my pictures will be output, and they'll all be in those directories, and it's really neat and really convenient. And I think this is something that DxO do particularly well and don't get enough credit for. But where DxO have received a lot of credit, of course, is for the noise reduction, which is genuinely groundbreaking. They are still, in my opinion, ahead of the pack in that respect. And so the other part is, and this is pertinent to this release in particular, is of course artificial intelligence. Now, the story here is that a couple of years ago, a lot of people, including myself, sort of nominated PhotoLab as being the next big thing. And there were a lot of hopes that it would displace Adobe Lightroom. And it seemed to be approaching a point where it would do that on merit. And I think what really happened a couple of years ago is Adobe brought out a suite of AI selection tools that effectively revolutionized the software, revolutionized the way that people do processing. It was now possible to do all your processing pretty much, or for a majority of your pictures, in Lightroom, and Photoshop was really required if you wanted to do something really fiddly and you know, really techy. So that was a big change, and DxO have taken their time catching up. It's been 2 years, I think. So this release brings with it a fully featured set of AI selection tools, and I've had a play with them, and they're no better than the Adobe selection tools. They're no worse either. It's artificial intelligence. It will select things. So you can easily work with them. I think they're slightly more trigger happy than the Adobe tools. In fact, they're a lot more trigger happy than the Adobe tools. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. I think the analogy I'd use here is like a guitarist sort of plugging in for a sound check in the Shea Stadium. in New York and finding that simply touching a string will produce, you know, millions of watts of output. The AI tool is a little like that. It takes a little bit of getting used to because it responds very, very quickly as you drag your cursor across the picture. But you don't have to leave it to its own devices. You can use the rectangular selection tool to outline the piece that you want to select, and that kind of controls it a bit better. But enough talking about it. Let's go and have a look at it. Okay, let's have a look at the AI masks. So we've got a fairly bog standard photograph here. There's a couple of tricky little aspects of it that we want to try out. And so let's first off have a look at selecting the sky. Now what we're going to notice here is that the sky is slightly unusual in that it's got very different tones in it, and there's also the matter of these mountains here which blend really very much with the sky. So this is going to be a hard one, so let's have a look and see how we cope with this. So we want to bring the local adjustments tab up, that's here, so we click on that and we choose AI adjustment, and then we do a plus. And we come down here to the mode, and what we're going to try and do is an automatic adjustment. So let's have a look at this. Okay, so there it is. So as I feared, it's applied this slightly unevenly. So it's got the it's included these mountains here in the background, which we didn't want to do. However, there's an easy way to get around this, and that is we create a submask, and I'm going to simply use a brush here, and we're going to use a negative brush, and I'm just going to trace around the outline of those mountains. Okay, and it's pretty much as good as you want it to be. Okay, so there's our sky mask. Now what you'll also notice is that we've now got some mask options underneath, right? So we go to mask 1. That's all the options, and we can raise the exposure, darken it down. We've got selective tones, clear view, which in my opinion is much better in the context of local adjustments. So you can see what a difference now this is making to the outline of that hill. It's leaving it alone. Contrast, micro contrast, white balance can make this a bit bluer or a bit warmer. And I probably would add a little tiny touch of magenta to the tones. We can change the tones much more radically than that if we want to. And we've got local lens sharpness optimization. Now what I would do personally is turn that off, because we're in the sky, so we don't want any real sharpness applying in the sky. Okay, so that's all good. Now what I want to do now is have a look at selecting some of these rocks, because there's a nice balance of light, but it's not quite bright enough on the rocks. So let's call this one sky, and this includes the negative brush and the AI mask. Alright, so now we're going to go and have a new, entirely new mask. It's still going to be an AI mask. Okay, so there it is. Now it's not defined yet. We've got to choose the mode first of all. So two ways of doing this, and I'll demonstrate both of them. So this one is the add an area, and what we do, we just draw a rectangle around the area and wait for the AI to select it, which it does with great efficiency. So let's have a look at the effect. We can just raise that up a bit if we want. Now you'll notice that this is just affecting the rock. I'll take those highlights off it, lift up the mid-tones a bit. And there we go. So let's do another slightly more complicated one. What if I want to take this rock, which is against the background of other rocks and overlaps on this rock here? Let's first of all see how that would go in as a normal AI mask. So we do another plus, and this time we're going to just go on the straightforward selection. Okay, so I move that over the area that I want it to be on. Now, sometimes this is easier than others, so that's going to give us a portion of it, and what I would do here is just add another submask here. So we'll add that one, keep that the same, and we're going to select this area here. Okay, and what you can see is that in doing that, it's picked up the edge of this rock and it's left the one behind alone. Now, because these are together in the same group, we can alter the exposure of them. Obviously, you'd want to be somewhere around there to keep it realistic, but that's the principle on which this rides. So you can do pretty good selections. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a viable shortcut, and it's a good way of getting your very quickly moving to select different areas in your picture that are of irregular shapes. Obviously, the greater the contrast between that piece and the backgrounds, the better it's going to be able to pick it up, but by and large these are pretty effective. Okay, so I'm going to close those, so they're all still there. We can go back and pick them up should we wish to. So that was this was the sky. Alright, so we can see there, and there are our masks. Okay, now I'm going to show you another aspect of this which has perhaps been slightly overlooked. Here we've got a photograph taken very early in the morning, and it's got the sort of biblical rays. It's not a particularly great example, but for this purpose it will suffice. So let's have a look. So we go to our local adjustments tab, we click on AI selection, go new mask, and we come down here and we'll again choose the automatic selections. Okay, let's have a look at that. Okay, so that's done a pretty good job. You'll notice that it's not intruded on the sea, and it hasn't intruded on the land, so it's observed the outline of the land pretty well. There's just this little bit here where there's a little amount of shading, but nothing too much to worry about. So what I'm going to do is simply, let's just have a little play with this. I want to try and emphasize those rays as much as I can, without making it look too overwrought. Okay, that's probably good enough for these purposes. Okay, so we'll take this, and I'll tell you what, let's just do another one. So we'll duplicate this mask. That's now mask 2. I hope that's got my sky in it, but what I want to do is to invert it. So that now gives me a selection of at the bottom of the screen. Okay, and you can see that it's following the outline of the hills, and that's all quite nice. So just to sort of make the point, I can lift up the bottom, exposure on the bottom. Okay, and we'll darken down the exposure here, make that look a bit better. Okay, rough, very approximate. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift these adjustments whole and transfer them to another photograph. Now, what's interesting about this is these are local adjustments. AI has taken care of the selections for us. So let's see how this applies to a very different photograph. Okay, and I'm really pushing the boundaries here, so let's have a look and see how it performs. Okay, so we'll copy our adjustments. So we're copying correction settings. Okay, that's all there. Let's take it across to this picture, which has got the same separation between sky and sea, but it's a very different photograph taken at a very different time of day. So let's go to that, and we'll paste all correction settings. Okay, and immediately you can see, and let's have a look at this. There's my sky mask. You'll see that that is observed the outline of the rocks and of the tree, which weren't in the original picture. Okay, and we look at the bottom and the inversion, and that has beautifully selected the tree and the outline. Okay, so what I would then do with this picture, obviously, is put a gradient across the right-hand side just to calm it down. So the point of this was simply to demonstrate that you can lift and shift the AI adjustments, and personally I think that is really cool. Now, it's not perfect. You will need to do, I have been devil's advocate in this, in that I've selected a deliberately difficult one. These pictures are not remotely similar, but it has done a good job, and that is something of interest. Okay, some general tips about how to use the AI tool. So what the AI tool is good at is selecting shapes, and it will use the outlines to do that. So first tip is, if you're having a problem with that, increase the contrast in the picture, then make the selection, then revert the contrast. The selection will stay. But let's have a quick look here at some more detailed stuff. So I'm going to make a contrast. What I want to do is select the water here. So you can see we've got a nice crisp outline all the way along here and along here. But here it's a bit hard to make out. So let's see how the AI copes. So we go to plus. Okay, so that looks reasonable. We've got a very straight horizon and a good outline around the rocks, so we'll go with that. And now what I'm going to do is bring this up to full size around here so we can see what was missed. And what's happened is you can see it's gone over the edge. So what we want to do is we want to pick up this little triangular bit. I'll just turn this off for a moment. We want to pick up the little triangular bit around here, and we want to sharpen that edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a submask. I go to my submask, and I'm going to choose a brush. I'm going to feather it a 0% and make it a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to go right in and add this little bit here. Okay, that'll do. Now I want to take out the other bit, so I can either Option and then erase that. What I could do here is make another sub mask and make it a negative AI mask, and we'll just go up here, bosh, there you go, much easier. And now let's make some little adjustments here. So that's, I think at full size we pretty much get away with that. You can see if we go back to 1:1, you can see very easily what's been affected here. So this is a much more satisfactory mask. You've got a little bit of a discrepancy here that probably needs a little bit more care, because let's go to the brush and let's just tinker with the opacity of it, bring that into line. Okay, and then that's much more like it. Okay, perfect. I think if you're, if you're what is now called a sort of content creator or creative, creating content for a variety of different platforms, you're not necessarily a studio photographer churning out high-resolution pictures to order for advertising campaigns. You're not in the 1%, like me. Then I think DxO PhotoLab is a viable alternative to Adobe Lightroom. I have to declare at this point, I do continue to use both. I've had 15 years at least, probably 20 years of Adobe Lightroom, and I have a catalogue that is absolutely enormous, or a series of catalogues that are enormous, so I'm not going to move anytime soon. But I do use PhotoLab a lot, particularly with my landscape photography, where I think it is very, very good indeed. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Perhaps a slightly different kind of review than normal, but there it is. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give us a tick down below. And if you have enjoyed this type of review, where we question the very roots of what we're doing, then subscribe to the channel, because this is an approach that I take for most of the videos that I make these days. So hopefully you'll subscribe, and we'll see you further on down the line. There'll be another video coming out next Tuesday, and I will be back in Spain by then, so looking forward to that. All right, guys, thanks very much. I'm just going to leave you with a shot of this rainbow behind me. I hope, if it comes out, it does. Fantastic. See you later, guys. Bye now.